You're listening to Through Help and Back. Through Help and Back is a podcast focused on mental health, addiction, treatment, recovery, and all things related to personal improvement and wellness. Don't worry, we're not here to talk about problems without solutions, and we're definitely not here to talk about struggles without success. So come with your problems, leave with our solutions. Brian Smith is with us. Brian Smith is the founder of the Presence Project, which we're going to hear all about, and is an amazing effort and an amazing organization. Brian is doing a lot of I don't want to say new age, but innovative interventions, especially focused on mental health in men. We've talked about on other episodes how there's sort of a growing gap, a growing epidemic. I don't want to say pandemic because everybody overuses that word, but definitely an epidemic of men's health, that we're facing issues that we haven't seen before. And Brian is a leader in that space and is on the forefront of that effort to kind of turn that around and provide men options. So Brian, I appreciate you making the time. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. I guess we'll dive right in. Tell me a little bit more about the Presence Project and how that first developed.
The Presence Project, it first developed about 5 years ago, and it started with meditation and breath work and some yogic practices. It was a very spiritual thing. And the more I started to, dive into these different practices, I started to see how complicated everything was, and how a lot of these spiritual techniques and these philosophies and these traditions are really all about escapism, which was actually perpetuating my own depression and anxiety. It was getting worse and worse. And it got to the point where I sort of just snapped back into it, and it became more of a doing. So the presence isn't this high idealed spiritual thing. The presence is your presence, your confidence, your self-motivation, your self-respect, right? You want to walk into a room and have that confidence that people look at that person and say, who is that guy? And that's really how it started. And then moving over into men's depression is just everywhere you look, you can see how depressed a lot of men are. And a lot of that comes down to purpose, right? We don't really have much more purpose in life. And, I see it a lot. And even in my own life, I've went from job to job and sort of just skating by, again, perpetuating depression and anxiety just because I had no aim in my life. And once I once I found my true aim in life, that depression just vanished. And not that it doesn't go away completely, because that's not the case. And I never want to assume that that's what happens. What happens is you have that direction, you have that aim and that focus, where when depression starts knocking on the door, that anxiety knocks on the door, you have a focus of an action to take to keep it from rushing back into your life. So that's like the short paraphrased version of how this all got started. And yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And you made a couple comments in there about, the Presence Project may have started developing 5 years, but it was kind of an offshoot of your own personal experiences and kind of alluding to some of the things that you dealt with. So for you, was it that lack of purpose that you felt for a long time in your life? Was it anxiety? Was it depression? What was it that you carried in and dealt with that kind of inspired you to think differently about this?
It was totally lack of purpose. That's how it all started. And, growing up, I went to college and I fell into like the party scene and stuff like that. I ended up dropping out because for the main reason was I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was like, why am I spending all of this money? I have no idea what I want to do. I took business classes and different stuff. And I'm like, I can't sit at a desk all my entire life. I'll go crazy. And, but then I got into some other things, but I just wasn't focused and driven enough to follow through. So I sort of drifted aimlessly for a good amount of years. I bartended for quite a while, which I ended up liking because I was able to, travel and really live life in a way where I thought I was living on my own terms, but really I was just following along with all these societal normalities, partying through your 20s and it's okay, you're young, which is a bunch of bullshit, really. But then I just snapped into it one day and started looking for something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And I was always very quick to be very reactionary, a lot of anger, a lot of depression and anxiety. So I fell into meditation and breath work. And that's how this all got started. And it had a big impact on my life. But the further I started going, I started to realize there's so much more to self-development, to keeping depression and anxiety out of your life than just meditating for 15 minutes and doing a little bit of breath work or some stretching or whatever it is, right? It's complete lifestyle shifting that we have to do. And when I say this, sometimes it could create some anxiety with people that I've worked with. They're just like, dude, I can't, all this stuff. How am I going to change all of these things? And it's just like, that's why I say a lot, lean into it, lean into the process, fall in love with the process, right? It's living, so just take advantage of every moment that you have and don't worry about, getting to the end goal, like the, destination or whatever you want to call it, right? It's the journey. And I know that's such a cliche thing to say, right? It's the journey, not the destination, but it's just so incredibly true. And just diving into each day, having that aim and really just keeping those negative states out of our life.
Yeah, there was I think it might have been Nike or whatever. They had that campaign that there is no finish line, and I always thought that was, potentially be pretty poignant for somebody, right? Because that's that immersing yourself in the process, the work, the journey, is the destination. But I thought that was very insightful, and people lose sight of that sometimes. With you, so I'm kind of getting a sense of your story here in college. Things like really went adrift. You kind of like you said, dropped out, got into the party scene, different things like that. Growing up, I mean, did you feel that sense of purposelessness then as well? Were you kind of like looking for answers even as a child, or were you kind of like on the right track and then college came and boom, I diverted? Like, which of that? Yeah.
I probably got off the track and started really diving into, again, like the fitting in, right, in high school, which happens to a lot of people. That's we want to be accepted and stuff like that, right? So that's when I really just started running with a little bit of the wrong crowd, and like smoking weed, drinking at a very young age, and not following. That's when like my procrastination, my insecurity, all this stuff started developing in those years. Because before that, I was very driven. Like I was very like one of those kids. I was like, why the hell would you ever smoke a cigarette? Like I loved basketball and sports. I was always very active. And I wanted to be, as a kid, wanted to be a professional athlete and stuff like that. But I also loved helping people too. Like I remember going in right before college, I said to my buddy again, I'm like, I have no idea what I want to major in, but I know I want to either help people or animals. So that was like my thing. And I remember one of my earliest memories is wanting to be a veterinarian. And, but yeah, then high school came, I sort of started running with the wrong crowd and just started shoving all my stuff down. And that's the thing too. We don't just shove down our insecurities and all that negative stuff. We shove down our greatness, right? Like growing up, like I always felt this thing, right? This thing that wanted to burst out from within me. And I shoved that all down to fit in with the crowd and society and go to college and play sports and all these different things. But really, I wanted to do so much more than that.
So it's interesting. That reminds me, we talk a lot in therapy. I was a therapist for a long time, still am to some degree. But we talk about like it's life-saving work. And people kind of question that sometimes. And they're like, well, but doctors are lifesavers, or like emergency medical is life-saving. You think about CPR, or you think about emergency surgery. But I think these processes of change are life-saving because they save us from the life we would have lived without the intervention, right? They save us from the life that, that drifting, that floating, that purposelessness, like that's not an experience you would choose for yourself. But you really touched on it there where you say you kind of give it up a little bit at a time and you let that kind of get pushed down, those higher hopes, those best thoughts for yourself. That's not what we would want for ourselves as children, but somehow at 25, we're like, fine with it now because like boiling the frog, we got there 1 degree at a time, right? So that's really interesting that you tap into that, not just repressing the bad stuff, but almost not giving yourself credit for who you could be or not pushing yourself to the person you could be. So that's interesting. Did you ever feel along the way that progressed, to my world, DSM diagnosis? Did you ever progress to diagnosable conditions because of this kind of floating and lifestyle choices? Like, do you feel like depression was part of the picture, or anxiety, or was it just that sense of unease about who I am and who I could be?
No, I mean, it turned into depression, and mainly because I'd love to talk about having true aim, right? And because we talk a lot about purpose, having purpose in our lives, which is huge, right? Like, we need that. But again, with getting to the destination, right? So, we have our purpose. Say, I love to use Robin Williams and Arnold Schwarzenegger as great examples. Both great actors. And Robin Williams, right? He attained his life purpose, right? He became one of the best actors in the world. Everybody loved him, won an Oscar and all these things. And he said that he became more depressed after he won the Oscar because he thought it was going to make him happy, and it didn't. So maybe he had something else to attain after that. What that is, nobody would know, but his story ended tragically because he never followed more of an aim in his life. But Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a great example of true aim, followed his life purpose of being this world famous bodybuilder and attained it. And then he became a world famous actor, which was like crazy. His story with acting is really funny, actually, because he was just this overdeveloped Austrian guy and somehow became the best one of the highest paid actors in the world, and then became governor, and now works with Special Olympians and all these things. So he never arrived and never finished at becoming the greatest possible version of himself. And to bring it back to what you asked me before, I started with meditation and breath work, and it just wasn't it. I would say to my fiance a lot, like, I love this stuff, but it's not what I'm meant to be doing. I need to be doing something bigger, something more, because people need more. They need more than meditation. They need to know how to work with their emotions and their reactions and push themselves further and further and find their purpose in life. And just sitting in meditation is not going to do that. So I fell into a really deep depression from that because I just had no idea how I was going to make this happen or what direction I had to go in. And that depression turned into anxiety, and it was really, really tough for quite a while. I was in this loop cycle of, a few months at a time, just being in this state where I was barely able to move. It was terrible. It was really, really bad. But once I stuck with the process of, I'm going to find this out, I'm going to figure this out. And I did. And that's when it pulled me out. That's when the depression, it just washed away. And again, it comes back, when I get into those tough moments in my life where I have a lot of work to do, right? Like, I'm building a business and organization. I want to help more and more people. And you know how it is building this stuff. It's difficult. It's hard. It's not easy. And sometimes I think back, I'm like, damn, was my life easier before I did all this stuff, but it wasn't, and I like to say a lot too, like, depression is easy. As crazy as that might sound, it's easy to fall into a pit and stay there forever. And it's hard to climb out and then stay out. And that's the big point I make with the project is not only do I help you pull yourself out of this state, but I help you find a way to stay out. And that's having that true aim and purpose and vision for your life.
Yeah. And one thing that I want to touch on is really quick at the beginning of your comment. You made a comment there about it wasn't enough for you as things were getting better. You're like, this just isn't enough. Like, people need more than this, right? Like, so you're already thinking outside of yourself. Like, there's nothing to give here. I can stay in breath work, or I can stay in meditation all day long, but it can almost be, is it an intervention, or is it sort of like the new place to get stagnant, where you're stuck in your depression? Now you're stuck in the treatment of your depression. And it's sort of like your life is still focused on your depression, just in a different way. And there's got to be something better than that out there. What you said you got stuck for a while, and it was kind of a dark time. And what got you out? What got you back into the process? What was like that? Was there an intervention? Was there a person in your life? Like, how did you? Because I'm sure there's people listening right now. They're like, man, I feel that stuck right now. So how did you get reconnected to the process? How did you get moving, and how did you get onto the track that would lead you out of that?
Moving. That's the perfect word. Moving, man. It's it's like I could really say that exercise saved my life. Like I was always a very active person, and I just love being active. And like going into all these very slow practices like meditation and breath work and slow yoga and stuff like that. You know, it's the way it's marketed out there is that it's gonna transform your life. And from my personal experience, it's all great practice, but I'm more about contrast. So like going and like kicking the shit out of myself, running for a couple miles and like doing push-ups and stuff like that, like really getting like beating my body up and then meditating and breathing and feeling, those things, is was the answer for me. Because like just doing that slow meditation, breathwork, yoga, and stuff like that made me more and more depressed. Because we're meant to be active, right? Like I go to a gym, it's called meant to move, and it's just so true. And I think a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety comes from not being more active, right? We sit a lot, we sit a little bit too much, and we go from sitting 8 hours at our job to sitting on the couch watching TV for 4 hours and then laying in bed. So, yeah, it's, what pulled me out, I would definitely exercise was just such a huge, huge component in that. And then really flooding my mind with positivity. And I'm not a toxic, positive person. I think being too positive is a very toxic thing. It can be because you're just not being
it's not authentic, right?
Yeah.
It's like, your house is on fire and like everything's an opportunity. Like, no, this sucks. Right now it really, really sucks. Like, let's be real, So I think when it's balanced with some authenticity is when it can be beneficial. But so you made a conscious choice though to kind of seek the positivity over the negative, frame for everything.
Like that's one of my practices in the morning. I just flood my mind with some sort of motivational speaker of some sort, or just myself, more like auto suggestion, not so much affirmation, but like longer, like I'll just say things that I want to do, or things that if I'm feeling a little shitty that day, I'll just say like, I'm sick and tired of feeling like shit. I feel like shit right now. I'm sick and tired of it. And then I'll go for like a run or go for a workout, or I'll jump in cold ass water and just freeze that shit out. And, that's why I love to say, lean into all of this stuff, right? Like if you wake up, most of the time you wake up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you're not going to be happy about it. So just lean into it, right? Like I wake up and I'm like, fuck, I don't want to do this. Like I'm not happy about this, but I know that I'm going to feel awesome in an hour because I'm going to go do this. And that has such a huge effect on the rest of your day. And then just doing that day in and day out really was such a huge answer for my life.
Well, behavioral triggering is real, right? So if you're doing any activity, whatever it may be, we'll use working out in this case for you, right? And you like working out. We know, some of the, physiology behind that, the dopamine that's going to come, that post-workout high, how you feel leaving the gym is always better than you feel. But if it sucks going in, you can still behaviorally trigger yourself. You can do the thing that you like, and you can not like doing it for the first 10 to 15 minutes. And eventually your brain catches up and goes, oh no, we like this thing. This is the routine here is we do the effort, we get the dopamine and life is good. So the behavioral triggering is really important. I say a thing on here all the time about we'll act our way into better thinking a lot faster than we'll think our way into better acting, right? And it's just that. If you just start doing the thing, it will change. Your brain will catch up. So that's interesting. So your learning process for this, I mean, you're kind of on the back end now, and I know you've really embraced this like lifelong learner, and I know that you pick up new stuff all the time, but did someone guide you through this? Was this like self-taught? Like, did you go to a program? Like, how did you pick up these tools along the way?
Yeah, so I've been through a lot of different programs. A lot of it was self-taught as well. A lot of the like psychology behind it. I read a lot of Carl Jung. He's definitely one of my favorite reads.
Shadow,
just amazing stuff especially on like, shadow work and stuff like that. That part of yourself that you don't want to look at and hang out with. Yeah, so I read a lot of him.
But it's always there in the background. Yeah,
for sure. But then like I've taken tons of meditation courses. I spent time in India studying meditation and breath work there. Lots of traveling, a lot of time in South America with different like shamanic traditions and stuff like that. But then back in the States, I've taken different coaching programs and stuff. And really, I've been investing in this and education and self-education for, the past, 10 years or so. And it's just been an amazing ride. But yeah, definitely lots of programs, lots of meditation techniques and exercise routines and different teachers and stuff like that. Yeah, I've just been really leaning into that lifelong student mentality, which I love. It's really humbling a lot of the time too, because especially early on when I figured out this is what I wanted to do, I wanted to be a coach and help people. The ego gets involved in the beginning, and it's just like you think you know everything and stuff like that. And I really had to check myself a long time ago and just lean into that student mentality, that leader servant mentality, which is something that I really love as well. To be a great leader, you have to be a great servant, to serve those people. So that's definitely the mentality behind it.
Well, and I'm trying to understand your true aim versus your purpose differentiation. And maybe that lifelong learning is what facilitates the identification of that true aim, right? Because purpose maybe is the broader picture. I know I want to help people. That's a purpose, and that can get you out of bed and get you moving. But your true aim may be, I want to help people who are dealing with homelessness, right? It gets more specific, gets more detailed, and even deeper still, I want to help people who are dealing with homelessness by enhancing their job skills, right? So even more granular detail, and so now that's something that like, okay, it's like a custom made suit. Like helping people is the off the rack suit, right? The helping people with homelessness by helping enhancing their life skills, that fits me perfectly, right? And there's an unlimited number of variations of that story. So I think that, if I'm understanding your true aim correctly, that's what you're talking about, is getting specific about how you're going to serve that purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great way to put it, because there's just so many offshoots to what you could do. And like Arnold Schwarzenegger, another great, like the example, like right now, I've been on this true aim trajectory for a long time. I just never used the word. And, for many years, it was teaching people how to breathe correctly, it's just like, it's a fulfilling thing to do, because like the statistics show that I think 80% of the population has a breathing dysfunction of some sort, which is crazy, and it's very simple stuff. It's breathing through your mouth too much, or just breathing not deep enough down into your diaphragm. And, like teaching people how to do this and then work with the anxiety and the reactions and being more present and stuff like that is a great thing. But it wasn't fulfilling me anymore. I knew there was more of a trajectory that I had to get on. And that ended up being more working with depression and anxiety. Now it's men specifically, because, it's getting bad. So, and we need, a lot of purposeful, strong, confident men in the world, more so now than I think ever. And, where that goes from here, the ideas are always been flowing, like I want to work with kids, because they need it as well, to have like, we tell kids all the time, you could do whatever you want to do, but then all of a sudden something shifts where all of a sudden you can't anymore. And, you fall into this structure, this, routine that society pretty much gives you, or your parents or whoever it is. And then all of a sudden, like your dreams are crushed. And that's the way, and then you go through the rest of your life on autopilot. And then we wonder why everybody's depressed and anxious. It's like, because you're meant for more, and
before we go on, I want to say a few words about Anew Behavioral Health. Anew Behavioral Health is an outpatient provider of mental health and substance abuse services in Ohio and New Hampshire. That means that Anew can successfully treat mental health and substance abuse issues, or dual diagnosis if you're struggling with both. Their integrated approach allows for them to successfully address issues related to anxiety, depression, addiction, trauma, and really anything that stands between your life and the life you could be living. You really cannot bring them an issue that they have not successfully treated. They have also solved one of the biggest problems for people seeking help. They have a dedicated team waiting to hear from you at helpnow@anewbh.com. If you contact them today, within 24 hours, you will have heard back from wait for this, a real live person, and will also have your first appointment scheduled at that time. So how do you contact them? Well, if you're in Ohio or New Hampshire, you're probably close to one of their local locations. You're welcome to go in. If not, you can always reach them online at anewbh.com. And if you're interested in services for you or loved one, use that address, helpnow@anewbh.com. Yeah, I work with a lot of families, a lot of kids, and it's for me, it's like a Disney intervention, right? We do that. We do exactly that. And I have parents in very dysfunctional families sit there in session with their children and say exactly that. Your life can be whatever you want it to be. You can do whatever you want to do. And those are really nice things to say. But invariably, at some point, the child goes, well, how? How do I do that? Right. And maybe the parents don't know. Maybe we don't know. There's no handbook for like each and every dream. Right. And so when the how falls apart and you're 9, 11, 13, 18, 36, and you've got this great dream, but there's no blueprint. You're having no success building that life. No one's telling you how. No one's equipping you with those tools. I think it becomes very discouraging really fast. And then it starts to, then now I'm questioning everything you've told me, right? You told me I could be everything. You've given me no tools to do it. You have no idea how to do it yourself. What else are you not being transparent with me about, And then right there, they're set adrift. And in the world right now with the screens and the social media and all the stuff we're consuming, there's a lot of places to just sit and not do anything, right? And be an avatar. And we're finding that's not fulfilling internally. So from your perspective, I know that you've got a special interest in the men's health component of that. Tell me a little bit about how that developed, and then also tell me, like you referenced some statistics and your view that those problems are really increasing at an exponential rate. Like, what are the problems that you're seeing with men's health right now that you're trying to fix and try to help?
Well, I think for one, and I think this is the biggest aspect, is that it's not treated effectively. I think the way mental health is treated, it's treated as more of an average and a number of all people. And that's men and women. So women's depression has to be treated differently than men's depression, but all mental health, all depression, all anxiety, all self-improvement is treated basically the same way. And that's very feeling oriented. And for men really, they need to get more in touch with the way that they feel and express it in a more constructive way. Like, this is true, but also this can be learned very, very quickly. And that's why it's so much more than that. Men need to have purpose in their lives, and we don't have it. It's lacking in many different ways. And this, I think, is the biggest issue in mental health. And, there's a lot of awareness about it, but that's not enough. It has to be more than just throwing out some memes every, once a month and just saying, oh, we're aware that, there's a mental health epidemic going on in the world. That's not enough. We need more action. And that's the biggest point, especially for men. Like, men need to be taking more action in their lives and, not sitting around, not getting stagnant and content, and all these words like contentment and stuff like that. They're being like, it's almost like a goal to attain. Like, I want to be content in my life, but it's not going to do anything for you. It's going to make you depressed and anxious to go do something. And that's, I think, the biggest point, to make as far as the way it's being treated. It's just too feeling dominant. It just needs to be more action dominant. Find your purpose, find your aim, and take that risk. And that's a big thing. Like, people are 30, 35, 40 years old, and they've been working this job that they hate. And you figure out, okay, this is causing my depression, or a big aspect of it, maybe perpetuating my anxiety. But now I have to take this massive risk in my life. And it scares the shit out of people, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. I think Jim Carrey had a great quote on this, and he said, you can fail at anything. You can fail at the job that you hate, so you might as well take a chance on the thing that's going to fulfill you in your life.
I was talking about his dad. He said his dad could have been a great comedian, and he didn't see that in his life. And so in a way, Jim's out living his dad's dream, But so how, I guess how and why, right? Those are always the big questions. So we accept the fact that there is a men's mental health epidemic, that we accept the fact that men are more purposeless or having a harder time finding their true aim. How did we get here? Like, why do we have these problems? How did this develop? In your opinion, of course.
Yeah. Could talk about this all day on this one. Honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with technology. I've always been, and I'm not like an anti-technology guy. Like, I was never really into it. I remember when Facebook came out, I think I was in my freshman year of college when Facebook came out. And I was just like that guy who's like, no, I'm good. I don't want to use it. And I didn't have a Facebook or Instagram or anything until like when I started doing all of this stuff and working with people and the virtual stuff. And I was like, okay, I'll get into it now. And there are good uses of it. But it's an addiction. It's an addiction, and a really crazy one, because people don't really, every now and again you have people say, oh yeah, it's addictive, but it's not, you can tell they're not taking the addiction seriously. They say it, but it's just, it's crazy. And I even see myself, like I'll be on my phone, like looking at some comments or something like that, but then I'll catch myself scrolling. And I'll even say in my head, like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop doing this. And it's still like flipping up. And I'm really good with it. I'm very mindful about it. So, I think that's a big issue. We see all of these things on social media, like people living these great lives and they're all so happy and they do all this stuff. And it's just like, for one, you don't know what goes on behind the scenes of those pictures. But it has a psychological effect on us where we're just like, I'm not doing enough. Why am I not doing this stuff? Why do I feel like shit and nobody else does? It isolated us so much, and it's called social media, but it's created a psychological isolation in our life. So I think that's a big issue. I think, not following what you love in your life, what you're passionate about, like just falling into the motions of high school, college, career that we most likely hate. Like a great example of this, I worked with a young kid not too recently, and he was in college, and he's super smart kid. He was majoring in biology, and we were talking, he was back on break, and he's like, dude, it's so hard. I don't know if I could do it. And I'm like, dude, you like just buckled in, lock it in. You can do it, man. And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, why don't you look into a different science, right? I was like, geology is an amazing thing. He likes to be outside. I'm like, dude, like I heard geology majors are like the happiest of all college students because they're always outside. And that's huge. That's a huge thing. And then a couple months later, I saw him and he's like, I changed my major to business. And I think that is a huge issue with college kids. A business degree is so easy to get where I think they just say, you know what, fuck it. This is too hard. The business route is safe, right? It's safe. You could most likely find a job. There's a lot of jobs out there. And then you end up, punching the clock, and not loving what you do.
Ian, it sounds like some of this is resonating with you individually. I'm kind of hearing him. Yeah. So what part of that are you connecting with?
The fact that people rely on it as like a safe option when actually it's not, just from like a job market perspective. And I don't want to do like a nerdy analysis here, but like you guys said, on the surface, it seems like the easiest degree. And in a sense, it could be because it's just so general. But I think it's usually a bad decision.
Yeah, I think one big problem, and I went through school. I mean, I've got a couple of degrees and spent a lot of time in school and thought I was going to be a college professor at one point in my life until I figured out what college professors do. And I think the problem is, or one of the problems, is this accepted idea that you go to college to find yourself and figure out what you want to do. I think we have that backwards. I think you need to go find yourself and figure out what you want to do. And if college can enhance that, then go to college to enhance that, right? So if they took that time and you did community service, you got into even some military stuff, National Guard, or you just did the Crocodile Dundee walkabout and spent 2 years just trying on different hats, the proverbial move to California, and sell t-shirts by the beach. And then that sucks. And so you end up in Dallas working at this, at this ranch, and that smells like, cow blank and everything. So you hate that. And then you end up north in the trees, up in New England where we are. And you're like, oh, wait. I love this. Like now it's clicking, it's resonating with me. And so then you go to college to learn more about how to do the thing that you found that you've loved. I think this pressure at 17, you graduate, yay, here's your cake. 2 weeks later, you're on a college campus is a huge mistake. It's a huge mistake. I think that we need to refocus that era of 18 to 21 as almost like an accepted experimental phase in people's lives, because it is anyway. And do those experiments socially out in the real world. Bring back the internship programs. I mean, every business should have interns flowing in and out of there all the time just to try it out. You don't have to pay them shit. You pay them, do whatever, $12 an hour. They carry papers, but they learn. I think about mine and Ian's relationship. Ian didn't want to work in the, human healthcare. He's learned a lot about healthcare, just us sitting around talking and hearing these stories. So he can accept it or reject it or whatever. But I just think that going off to find yourself, because the problem is you end up 21, 22. Now you're in debt. You've been drunk, if not worse, for 3.5 years, right? Because that's kind of what happens there. Let's be real about it. We all know what goes on in the prisons, right? Well, we all know what goes on college campus too. So we could just talk about it, And then you're left with the same questions, and you're sort of like, okay, now what? Let's do the now what first, and then refine that. That's kind of what I tell my kids. Like, if you've got a purpose, you got something you want to do, and college will propel that forward. But general studies and humanities and the figure it out degrees, I don't know. I don't want to go after the Department of Education, but like those are not yielding the results. And I think they're contributing to what you're battling, Brian, in terms of like trying to help these guys with their lack of purpose, because they're getting spit out on the opposite end. They find their way to you, and now you're trying to build purpose from that, So I don't know if you're seeing a lot of that as well, but that's what I see is.
Oh, for sure. Everything you just said, I've said, like, I think verbatim many, many times, for sure. And I say it to my nephew. My nephew just graduated high school, and we talk, and I'm like, what do you think you want to do? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, take it slow, man. Like, go to community college. Take like 2 classes a semester. Like, he's working, right? Like, get into the workforce. Like, I was a bartender. I worked in restaurants for quite a while, and that's a great job to have as a young person. You build social skills and stuff like that. Like, I'm a very naturally introverted person, and working in restaurants helped me with my speaking, like being able to speak to people I don't know and engage and stuff like that. So like, you can get out into the world and learn a lot. And very, very quickly too. And then, like you said, then you find that thing, and you're just like, okay, like, college can help me do this. And that was a big thing when I started looking for my purpose. I was like, I'm probably going to go back to college and get a geology degree. I love nature. And, that was my thing. But then I started meditating and doing breathing, and I'm like, wow, this has really changed my life. Let me dive further into this. And then I started going in that direction. But always listening, to your intuition, like, it doesn't have to be college. College is great. I'm not anti-college in any way, but you don't have to go to college. You can have a very successful life in other avenues as well. It's just finding that, right? And taking that time period, 18 to 21, I think is great, to sort of figure that out.
And it fits perfect with your sort of embrace the suck, lean into it kind of mentality, right? Because what's that phrase that what you most need or you most want is going to probably be found on the opposite side of what you least want to do, right? And so putting yourself in, you're an introvert, putting yourself in a highly social situation where that's demanded of you, that's going to be tough. I mean, I imagine your first couple of days at work were incredibly stressful.
First couple years, I would go in like, oh my God, dude, I gotta do this again. Like, and I just would feel so awkward and stuff. But then I just love, the lean into it. Like, once you lean in and you get into the situation, everything sort of just washes away, subsides, whatever you want to call it. And then you're in the situation, and it's not as bad as we make it out to be in our heads, especially with anxiety, like, this is a big anxiety thing, because I would feel that anxiousness. And I even feel it to this day when I have to get stuff done for my business, right? Like, I have to make a video or work on my website or whatever it is, my program, and I have to sit down and do it, like that anxiety builds and builds and builds until I get in the room, I sit down, and all of a sudden it just washes away. And it's like, okay, let's do this thing. And then, and then it's just staying in the room, being engaged in what you're doing.
That's that mentality of do the toughest thing of your day first, right? Because if not, it's going to hang over your head. And like in life, it's like that too. And the issues that people may be dealing with, anything that you avoid gains power over you, by the minute. I got to have a difficult conversation. I haven't had it. I'm thinking about it. It's dominating my thoughts. Now I'm getting nervous. I'm getting anxious. My stomach's upset. I'm feeling stressed. It's taking away from all my other things. But the moment after you do the terrible thing, it's like that relief washes over you. So if you move towards it, you gain power over it. If you avoid it, it gains power over you. If you move towards it, it gains power over you. So tell me a little bit about the specifics of your work then. So somebody comes to you, we could talk a little bit about how you're engaging with folks, whether you're doing that like online or in person or what. But I want to get a sense of like, if someone comes to you, what are the typical issues that they're bringing to you, and how do you begin the work with them? How do you kind of start building a plan or a purpose with somebody?
So yeah, this is all mostly virtual. I've had a couple in-person clients like in my local area, but I've been really focusing on the virtual stuff. So it's all one-on-one coaching. I have a couple different like video modules that I would give to people just to, look over the week. But I've been in so many different programs where it's all video modules, right? You don't have any direct contact with the person really. And some of the direct contact I've had wasn't really so great, but either way, it's a lot of video stuff. And I think especially with depression and anxiety, it has to be personal and one-on-one, and you have to feel that other person. So, and then you have to feel me, right? Like what I'm saying and what's coming through needs to be for that person. And I think that's why I'll always stick to one-on-one or at least in-person group coaching. It's like, I'm going to stand firm on that in my own business. And I do have some video modules too. So to start, people get a breathing module, a breathing mini course, just to make sure that they're breathing properly, to add a little bit of a practice into their life. And breathing is just huge game changer with anxiety, with reactions, with staying present, and so many different things. But it enhances your health in many different ways. So that's like the kickoff to the program.
Can you stop there for a second? Can you stop for 1 minute on that? So I do want to go through the program, but when you say breathing properly, I don't want you to do a whole course, but can you hit the high notes on that? Like what it means to breathe properly? Cause yeah. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good breather. Been doing it my whole life, but I wonder.
That's what I try to tell people, man. I'm like, you're already a master breather. You've been doing it forever, because I've worked with a lot of yogis and pranayama, and it's just like, they're all about perfection. And it's just like, one, you're never going to perfect these things. So just stop trying. But at the end of the day, you are a master breather. That's why I tell people, like, they get very, insecure or, think it's going to take a long time to get good at these things. But with breathing, it's very quick because, again, you've been doing it forever. So improper breathing is breathing too often through your mouth, and then also breathing too short and too shallow. So our diaphragm is located right beneath our lungs. And if you're not using your diaphragm, you're not bringing in enough oxygen and you're pushing out too much CO2. So your internal environment is going to be very acidic. And that's a breeding ground for disease and cancer and all types of stuff. And that's all just from breathing improperly. That's not even talking about what you're eating, lack of exercise, your mental state, the thoughts that you're ruminating on, all different things. But it starts with your breathing. And it's such an easy fix. It's just to always breathe in and out through your nose. And that's why we practice, right? Like people say, like, why would you just sit down and breathe? And you're not doing it for that moment. You're doing it so when you're in your regular life and you're irritated or you're just breathing improperly for whatever reason, you'll take note of that and then you'll just switch it. Start breathing in through your mouth or in through your nose. And that's really the biggest thing is nose breathing and deeply into your stomach. That's why we practice like deep belly breathing. And so again, like when we do deep belly breathing, we're expanding our abdomen, but we don't have to do that in regular life. You're doing that just to retrain your muscles, so you just breathe a bit deeper than you normally would be.
So kind of retraining that autonomic system and just building muscle memory in a way, right? So your brain and your body will naturally default to that setting versus what it's currently defaulting to. So that's interesting. Have you tracked that? Like, have you brought your respirations per minute down by a significant? I mean, how do you track progress in proper breathing? Do you watch oxygen levels? Do you just track the pace of your breathing, counting? I mean, what?
I'll track like usually when I exercise. I'll do a couple different techniques when I exercise. So I'll try to like I'll run for a little while, and I'll try to breathe mostly through my nose. And then once you start like really getting into a run or hard exercise, you naturally default to breathing through your mouth. And then I'll slow it down a little bit and take it back through my nose and try to limit. So I'll put it on my watch. So in a minute, I try to keep my breathing to like 8 or 9 breaths. And yeah, so like there's benefits to this type of stuff. It's not a absolutely necessary thing to do, but it does increase for peak performance. It's huge. So you can actually imitate a high altitude training experience at sea level just from different types of breathing practices. So that's really good too. But most of the time, like I think the greatest benefit of breathing is just to calm down your overactive nervous system when you're about to explode. And if somebody like your wife pisses you off, or your kids are being crazy, or whatever it is, right? And you're about to react because, you're just irritated over who knows what happened that day, and you're about to take it out on somebody that doesn't deserve it. Bringing yourself back to your breathing pattern and then calming that down is, I think, the biggest benefit to breathing that there is. So that's like my main focus with it.
It's a nice redirection with anxiety too, right? Just to get people focused in on their breathing, because I dealt with anxiety in the past. You're feeling it in your hands, you're feeling it in your chest. You're like, oh my, and now your thoughts start to spiral behind that. So if you can just kind of baseline yourself and even set a goal of 8 to 10 breaths per minute, that's a really good intervention for folks that are dealing with anxiety. Before you react to your anxiety, before you run to the hospital, before you grab the benzos, before you go into any other intervention, let's just get your breathing back to baseline. Then we'll intervene as necessary. And in most of those cases, once they get their breathing back to baseline, no intervention is necessary. That was the intervention. So it's interesting. So I didn't mean to stop you with your process, but I agree the breathing thing is so huge. I wanted to hear your thoughts on proper breathing for sure.
Yeah. I'm glad that you did, because it's really a huge game changer with anxiety specifically. So yeah, it's like you said, like you don't have to go reach for, the Xanax or go to the hospital. I can't how many people I know that think they're like dying from, that anxiety. And I get it. I've felt it in that way too. But yeah, just bringing yourself back to baseline, concentrating on your breathing, slowing it down is like 9 times out of 10 going to be the intervention for sure.
So once you get your guys to a good place with the breathing, or if you introduce that, what are some of the other elements that you want to add, other tools to their toolbox?
So the program is based off 4 pillars, and it's over 3 months. And the way that works is going to be individual. It's all based off these 4 pillars, but the way that it's going to flow throughout these 3 months will be different for everybody, because everybody's in a different spot in their lives. Some people need a lot of attention in different areas. So the 4 pillars are mindset, which is just huge. I think it's the biggest pillar that we really need to work on, because we don't do it enough, so, that's the biggest thing. And we do that in different ways. A lot of it is leaning into things that you don't want to do. So your mind is telling you not to do this, not to do that. And those are the things you're going to end up doing.
Yeah.
And yeah. So, and it's huge. I love David Goggins. He's like one of my favorites right now. And he says that when you're doing something and your mind tells you to stop, there's no growth. But if you push past that and you do that thing that your mind's telling you not to do, it grows. And just that one little visual I love, because it helps me push past things, especially when I run. I hate running. I do not like it. I never did, but it feels amazing after I'm done. And that's something that I use to sort of push past and to build that mindset. And it just trickles into your life in so many different ways, with self-confidence and self-respect and motivation and all these different things.
Well, speaking about growth, your guy Arnold, they would talk about his rep sets and things like that. And he was talking about some exercises, and he would only do 5 reps or 6 reps. And some of the other lifters were like harassing him, like, oh, we do 20 reps and, you're supposed to be this big, he goes, yeah, but I only count the ones that hurt, and
yeah, dude, I love it. Yeah. I think about that when I'm working out all the time. My buddy tells me, he's like, do 15 of these. And I get to I always lose count. And I'm just like, I do that. I'm just like, okay, like when it starts hurting, I'll start counting a little bit.
Yep, exactly.
And yeah. And it sounds like just like a working out thing, but it's not. It's such a mental thing.
It's a growth mindset. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. So that's huge. And we do a lot of mindset work and different types of journaling and stuff like that. And then true aim, we talked a lot about true aim. Finding your true aim is a pillar. It's just imperative to find this in your life, especially as men. We need that purpose. We need that trajectory in our life to, tap into that greatness that's within us, because we all have it. And I say it a lot too, especially with social media. Like, we see firsthand how awesome people are. We see firsthand too how shitty people could be, but we see a lot of really cool stuff, people climbing mountains or doing these just incredible feats, helping other people, whatever it is. And it's like, we worship these people, like musicians and athletes and all these things. It's like, we worship these people because they're triggering that greatness that's within us. And we need to just take that risk and jump, that's the thing. People think, it's going to take me too long to find this. And it's not. You already know. You already know what it is. You've thought about it a million times. You just need to get on the path, the trajectory, and just keep walking, keep doing, keep acting. And eventually, and sooner rather than later, you're going to say, holy shit, this is it. And that's when it gets really fun and really difficult too. But you're going to love every second of it.
I hear mindset as number 1. I hear true aim as number 2. So what are the other 2 pillars?
The third pillar is finding your equation. So, we go on the internet, right? We see all of these things, right? We Google, for example, meditation. I want to start meditating. I need to be calmer in my life. So Google, how do I meditate? And 4 billion things pop up. So many different techniques, so many different breathings and exercise and mindset and all this stuff, right? And it has to work for you. So that's a big, big aspect. And I really do pride myself on compassionate listening and being fully engaged in who you are. I think it's the only way to give you what you need, because there's a billion meditations, there's a billion journal prompts, there's a billion of this and that. And being able to find the thing that's going to work for you is imperative. And that goes for everything. So a good example of this, a recent buddy of mine that I've been working with is a bartender, and we met bartending years ago, and he really lives the bartending lifestyle. He's up until like 5 o'clock in the morning, still, like every night, and sleeps all day. And, he came to me and he's like, dude, I need to make some changes. I feel like there's more and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you're more, and let's go get it. So, he sleeps until like 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon. And, I remember the first conversation we had. I'm like, look, dude, I'm not going to tell you have to just switch around, like wake up at, 10 now or something like that. We got to take it gradually, so it's sustainable. And, I think we worked together for 3 months, and he was waking up 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, just sleeping all day and going to work. Now he's getting up at like 10 and riding his bike for 120 miles a week. So being able to gradually do things and find the things that work for you is just, it needs to be done. It's everything, like every little thing doesn't work for everybody. It has to be tweaked up a little bit for individuals.
Well, that individualization is so important. Like even in therapy and everything else that we do, if you feel like you're given something out of the box and like everybody gets the same worksheet, it's like elements of this might apply to me, but I'm not going to really connect to the larger process until you find ways to individualize it. You talk a lot about the exercise and diet, working out. That's the same way, right? It's not just as simple as carnivore diet versus keto versus, whatever the hell Ian does with all the plants. And also, you got to find the thing that clicks and works for you, and that's when it really takes off. And it's not just like downloading a workout off the internet. It's like, well, yeah, but I'm not really feeling it with this exercise, so I'm going to substitute this in, or I want to go, 4 sets of 8 instead of 3 sets of 12, whatever dials it in for you. And relationships are the exact same way. We get with couples and, well, here's some things that have worked for other couples, and it's like a buffet. Like, well, we're going to take this and we're going to take that. They try everything at first, right? And they're like, but this works for us. This works for us. The rest of it can go to hell. I'm not going to deal with it, and that's great that you celebrate that. You don't say, oh, you're not working the program properly. You're not doing all the steps. Like, no, it's really generally just those 2 or 3 things that individualize it and really make it click for somebody. So I think it's amazing that you have that as part of your program. I really do.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it's huge. And it's always been since like day one that was like my thing, becoming your own teacher, and finding those things that work for you. 'Cause it just has to be that way. And then the fourth one is your spiritual walk. I'm a very spiritual person, always have been. This is not in any aspect saying, hey, this is what true spirituality is, or this is what you have to believe. It's none of that. It's finding your own spirituality, whether that's just believing in you, like it doesn't have to be anything outside of that. It can just be you, but having a dream and a vision so big that you're forced to have faith in something bigger than yourself to achieve it. And that could just be the universe. It could be a specific religion, God, whatever you want, like that's not what we talk about. We just talk about, hey, like, you need to walk out what you're doing every single day and getting in alignment with that. And, because there's a lot of, talk out there, right? Especially with social media, there's a lot of, spiritual talk or, coaching talk. It's like, are you walking this stuff out every single day? Are you doing what you're saying you're going to do, what you want to do, or are you just, talking? And, that's another big aspect of it too. And these 4 pillars just really, they all play into each other as well. Like one sort of feeds into the other, and they could be interchangeable, which I think is a really powerful aspect as well.
And probably synergistic in their effect, in that when you get really good at the first one and you get really good at the third one, the interplay between the two multiplies their impact, right? Then you add the fourth piece, and then you add the second piece, and they can be in different orders. But it sounds like they work synergistically together, that it's not 1 + 1 + 1. There's some multiplication of impact there. When you really get right in all 4 of these areas and things really start clicking, you get exponential growth, right? You're not moving at a pace of 1 anymore. You're moving at a pace of 4 at a time. And that's amazing. And there's also some elements in there that I'm picking up on that feel a little bit like some of the core elements of 12-step, in that find a power greater than yourself. And they do that same kind of talk of like, well, it's spiritual. It doesn't have to be, whatever you want to do in terms of religious versus spiritual. But I think that's huge. I've talked with parents. They talk, my life was this. Then I had children. I had something bigger than myself. I got outside of myself. And you, like Jung, so that's that destruction of the ego state, right? That's that not letting the ego be the only thing, the only filter that goes through. I've got other things, bigger things to consider, and it can kind of quiet down and tame that ego a little bit to where you can get into action and movement. So amazing. What about obviously with your pillars, that's gone well. Touching back on, we'll wrap up here in a minute, but before we do, I want to go back to the men's health issue a little bit. So those are individualized strategies, men, women, whoever. That sounds like you can individualize that to anybody. What about going back to that state of men's health as a group? What are your recommendations? I know this is kind of big, like for society as a whole, or for men in general. Like, how do we get this turned back around? What are things that men can be doing to seek purpose, to get in alignment with what it means to be a man? There's a little bit of a war on masculinity right now. Like, if you show strength, what's masculinity, what's toxic masculinity, and who gets to decide, and things like that. So do you have advice for the Ians of the world, the younger generation of men that are coming up, to kind of help get back in alignment with what it means to be a man and kind of reverse this loss of purpose that you see out there?
Yeah, for sure. So, I like that you brought up, toxic masculinity and masculinity. But Jordan Peterson, who I'm a big fan of as well, says toxic masculinity is the lack of masculinity. And, what it comes down to is a lot of it is men are being taught to be more and more passive in the world. And, I think a masculine energy is an active, a doing, a protective, and evolutionary energy. And it's very creative as well. And we're losing touch with that for many different reasons, for whatever reason. And I would also say, stop watching the news. It's just such nonsense, and you attach to an ideal that it's not even yours. All these things are being given to you. So I would say find out who you are, and that's a process that you absolutely have to lean into. And you'll start to realize, are these my ideas? Was I given this, or do I truly believe in this? And you'll know, you'll know instantly. And then standing firm on what you believe in, right? Like being virtuous. I'm a big Stoic guy. I love Stoicism, and holding that virtue, whatever that is. Like, who are you as a person? And more often than not, I'm very optimistic with people and humans. I think we're mostly good, not mostly bad. And that's a big reason why I don't watch the news. They'll tell you the opposite. So it's really, just being present in your life, figure out who you are, and then start adding in these pillars into your life, right? Figure out who it is that you want to be, what you value in your life, and then stand firm on it. Be strong in that stance, whatever that is. And it doesn't have to be politically correct either. You also don't have to go on the internet and start blasting every little thing either. I think there's a Stoic philosopher that says, don't talk about your philosophy, live it, and I try to do that more and more in my life too. I talk less and less about what I believe in and more about doing these things every single day, which is, again, walking out what you believe in, not just talking about it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that living it. I think the social media stuff is ridiculous. I think Twitter is like putting a sign in your front window and expecting cars that drive by to be affected by that. You post something and that's supposed to change the world. And some people can do that. But I really like what you said about standing firm on what's true for each individual, because there's so much in debate and discourse, especially politically today, that if you take a position, they try to jam the opposite position on you as well. So if you say, I like that men can be strong, they will try to hand you, oh, you want women to be weak. I didn't say anything like that. Nobody said that. Here's what I said. I like it that men have the option to be strong, right? And so you do have to stand firm, because the first wave of trolls, or whatever you want to call it, that will come for you will do that. They'll try to also assign you the opposite position. I love America. Oh, you hate the world. No, I love America. I like living here. It's great. That kind of stuff. And so there is the power of the mob, right? And you start getting some feedback like that, and people have buckled to that. And power is a big thing that's in play here. Some people are in positions. People have lost their jobs over less controversial views than that, And so I think with your pillars, if people can get right with who they are authentically, internally, and kind of have a true aim, then they'll be foundationally stronger to resist those winds as people try to push them into views or positions that they never took in the first place. They can stand on that. So I think that's impressive. So, listen, hey, I appreciate your time. We could go all day. It's we got to have you back, man. I know you're down in New Jersey. We're not too far away, so we're going to have to connect and do that.
For sure.
Before we go, how do people find you? How do people connect with you?
So you could find me on Instagram at The Presence Project. It's _the presence _project, or by email, which is brian@thepresenceproject.net. And yeah, you can just reach out to me, and I'll send you a questionnaire and different things to move forward, in the process. If you're looking for somebody to help you, coach you through, some depression, anxiety, find your purpose in life, peak performance, whatever it is that you want to tap into in your life, I'll help you do that. And it is geared towards men's depression and anxiety. But that's not, the true aim, right? That's the purpose right now. The aim is much more than that. So if you're struggling mentally in any way, yeah, give me a call. and we'll get that figured out.
And Brian will straighten you out. He'll help you find and embrace that suck. He's going to teach you how to breathe. We didn't talk much about this. He's going to stick you in a cold tub that's going to freeze your nipples off, and that's going to change things for you. But no, it's amazing, man. And I think that in so much of these helping professions, you're going to have impact on people that you may not even see for years and years down the road. But this affects families, this affects children, this affects future generations. So I just appreciate your leadership in this space, and you have our support, and anything we can do to collaborate and support your work, we're very happy to do that, man. So thank you again for the time. Appreciate it.
Oh yeah, you got it. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And thank all you guys for listening and tuning in, however you're listening to us. If it's on, whether it's on YouTube or any of our other social platforms. You've heard the commercial partway through, but we always give a shout out to Anew Behavioral Health at the end. Like Brian, Anew has, helpers and healers and coaches and therapists and psychiatrists and on and on and on standing by. We always talk about diagnosis and these heavy labels, depression, anxiety, things like that. For me, therapy is like the gym in the sense that if you just feel that things could be better, if you just feel like maybe I'm a little bit off, Anew has folks that can help you get aligned with your true aim, to steal one of Brian's words, get you connected to your purpose and get you back on track. So in Ohio, New Hampshire, you can check them out. You can find them online, anewbh.com. If you need help right away, you can email them at helpnow@anewbh.com. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that. Hopefully you'll get in touch with Brian. Hopefully you'll find your true purpose. And until then, I hope you'll take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thanks so much. Hey guys, although Through Help and Back is an excellent podcast with a lot of great ideas, I do want to let you know that in no way is Through Help and Back expected to be perceived as or relied upon in any way as specific medical advice or mental health advice for you personally. The information provided through Help and Back on our website or our podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment that can be provided by your own providers. Do not use our content in lieu of professional advice given by qualified medical professionals, and do not disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking professional advice because of the information you have read on our website, heard on our podcast, or otherwise received from us. Although we love discussing issues related to healthcare, mental health, and addiction, we are not providing direct healthcare, mental health care, medical, or nutrition therapy services. We're not attempting to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure in any manner whatsoever any physical or psychological ailment, any mental or emotional issue, disease, or condition. We are not giving you specific medical, psychological, or religious advice whatsoever. Please take care of yourself and take care of others as you always seek the advice of your own medical providers and your own mental health providers regarding any questions or concerns you have about your specific health, or before implementing any recommendations or suggestions from us. These are ideas that have worked for other people. We think it's important to share them. We do not guarantee that they will work for you specifically. Do not stop taking any medications without speaking to your physician, nurse practitioner, physician assistant, mental health provider, or any other healthcare or medical professional. And if you have or suspect that you have a medical or mental health issue, contact your own healthcare provider promptly. Also, one last thing, if you know or suspect that you are currently experiencing a crisis, it is absolutely imperative that you seek the advice of your doctor or other emergency healthcare services prior to ever thinking about using our content. We love the conversations. We're glad you're stopping by. We hope you take a lot from the content. But again, for your specific individual medical situation, please always seek quality personal care from your own providers. Do not let this information or this advice stand on its own. Thanks so much for listening.